10 random magic cards. Day number 64. Will I be able to control this monster while I attempt to do my job? It's a good job, though. We're going to look at random magic cards, and we're going to rate them. But will Ziggy allow me to see where my cursor is on the screen? All right, first card of Tuesday is Chalice of Life. 3 mana for an artifact. You gain 1 life. Then, if you have at least 10 more life than your starting life total, transform Chalice of Life. It transforms into Chalice of Death. This is an artifact. You can tap it and have a player lose 5 life. That's very cute. It's a very cute card. I seem to remember this. Yeah, it's from Dark Ascension, and only ever printed in Dark Ascension, and still worth like 50 cents. From Dark Ascension. Ziggy, you are taking over this video. Did you know that? Are you aware that you're doing that? You're very hard to lift. Jeez Louise. Macaroni and cheese. I've got a fat cat. I'm sure I did that to you. It's all my fault, and I should probably fix it because I love you. But yeah, this is cute, right? This is pretty cute. And in certain commander decks, I'm pretty sure it's easy enough to get 10 more life than your starting life total relatively quickly. So I don't know. It's neat. I have to kind of like this a little bit. I'm going to give this a, does this go in Dina? Does it go in Dina? I'm not going to write down to buy it. I picked up my pen to do that. But no, I don't think we absolutely need this, which actually impacts its score a little bit. I'm going to give this like a 5. Well, no. I'm going to give this a 4.91. We'll do that. I just don't think that it's actually quite there. I think the gain 5 life or, just hit somebody for lava axe whenever you tap it is probably something that's not going to happen as often as you want it to. And apart from that, it's just 3 mana tap to gain a life. That's actually not that good. So maybe if you want to trigger a life gain, effect that triggers when you gain life, right? Like, okay, maybe. But outside of that one pretty narrow use, it's a lot of mana for not actually that much. So we'll move on to Wayfarer's Bobble. This is a single mana for an artifact. You can pay 2, tap it, and sack it to search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle up. Just a fine effect. It's an egg. Sometimes you want to play artifacts for value, and then sometimes you want to sack those artifacts for value. Sometimes you want to have artifacts in your graveyard for value. And then obviously you want to have lands for lands. So this effect is not necessarily the best that this ability has ever been printed, because there's multiple artifacts that do similar things to this, right? They printed a lot of different Wayfarer's Bobble. But it is one of the better ways you can achieve this effect. So I'm going to give it a 4.7 because it is, I think, a little less powerful than the average Magic card in this day and age, at least. Maybe not 10 years ago, but nowadays I think the average card has a little more oomph than this, but there's still like enough narrow situational. There's some decks that want it for whatever reason, and some decks just want it because they want to hit their drops and something to do on turn 1, right? So Wayfarer's Bobble probably should get an honorary 5. But again, I think with so many other ways to do this, and pick and choose the best ways to do it, and you have limited slots in your deck, I think that it's actually slightly below average. So you'll play it sometimes though. But we'll move on to Trasgo Frenetico, which is actually Frenzied Goblin. This, originally printed in Ravnica, City of Guilds, is a single mana, a red mana, for a 1/1 Goblin Berserker. When it attacks, you may pay red. If you do, a creature can't block this turn. This saw play in its original standard environment because there was a Goblins deck, really a mono red aggro deck, that just played a bunch of creatures, went very, very wide. That version of the deck did. And actually, I think it was a Goblins deck, now that I think about it. But, yeah, it used this card to great effect. It turns out that this is kind of a mana sink later in the game. Not even that late in the game. Turn 3, turn 4. A lot of your cards only cost 1 to 2 mana anyway. So even in the relatively early turns, 3, 4, you're going to have extra mana to use on this. Keep their largest creature from blocking. Really screw up their math. So sometimes it keeps their only creature from blocking. Frenzied Goblin was really good for its time period. And I think it still pops up in commander decks every now and again. But I'm going to give this, again, kind of for the same reasons I gave Wayfarer's Bobble a slightly below average score. I'm going to give this a slightly below average score. But I mean very slightly. This is like a 4.9. It's not usable in everything. It's really only in one specific kind of deck. And it's got to be even a specific version of that specific deck. So it can't just be mono red. It's got to be go wide or goblins. And those are increasingly more rare. I feel like in these days, you see a lot more spell-based red decks, not just in standard, but even in other formats. So Card's time may have passed it by, but it's still a pretty good utility Goblin, so 4.9. Definitely. But I'll move on to Mortivore here. Printed a lot, but originally in Odyssey. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a star Lurgoyf. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, and you can pay a green to regenerate it. So just more or less almost a strict upgrade on the original Goyf. I think the original Goyf may have had an extra point of toughness. I think it was star and then star +1, if I'm not mistaken. But so if the opponent like exiles graveyards, all graveyards, then this dies. And you can't regenerate it because it has 0 power and toughness. 0 toughness is the important part of that equation. But a Lurgoyf that cost the same as the original Lurgoyf at the time and space that they printed Odyssey, that regenerates that's pretty good. Pretty good for the time period. And apparently it's still pretty good. Modern Horizons 3 Commander, which just came out. There's a 15-cent version of this. Every other version costs well over $1. Well over $1. Some into like $2.50 territory. So card is still played in some things, right? Pretty obviously. So I can't judge it too badly because Regenerate's a really good ability. Regenerate is a fantastic ability. Like one of the best things or worst things about Lurgoyf creatures, even in the modern day, is that they can just be go for the throated or Doombladed or whatever, right? This guy can't be Doombladed, so there's that. But if they do have a removal spell for him, Regenerate is amazing because most Lurgoyf creatures, which are your whole game plan, don't have the ability to like deflect removal, and this guy does. So ultimately, I will give this guy a 5.2. Which may not be high enough. Rampid Growth. Oh boy. Rampid Growth. Have we done this card before? I think we may have done this card before. Maybe. But let's do a quick rating and not count it. Rampid Growth is an 8. Rampid Growth is an 8. This is a fantastic Magic card. Always will be. They're scared to print it in Standard. Oh my god, it's Blood Moon. Blood Moon, originally printed in the dark down here and still costs $65. If you've never seen this card, get a load of this. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an enchantment. All non-basic lands are now basic mountains. What does that mean? Well, it means they don't tap for whatever they're supposed to tap for, and instead they just tap for red. So if your deck is blue and black, or especially if your deck is 3 colors and none of them are red, good luck dealing with this. Good luck casting any spells. Once this is out, does this card look supremely irritating? It is. It turns out it's because it is. Card is stupid. I might pick up a Chronicles version because it's less than $10 to annoy people. And I don't usually love to annoy people. And when you do play Blood Moon, you are persona non grata. You are public enemy number 1 as soon as you drop this card onto the table. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's also famously hard to get rid of because they're going to have a hard time removing an enchantment with only like spells from a color that doesn't remove enchantments. You know what I mean? Like red really does not. It can't remove enchantments. So if all they have access to is red mana, all they have access to is red cards, and they're going to have a problem removing this, right? So just an absolutely disgusting card that still looks so cool, even in the modern. I love old Magic cards, man, but especially Blood Moons. It's got something special about it. And we all have horror stories about playing against this card. And some of us have stories of glory about playing with it. But all that said, I have to give Blood Moon like an 8.3. Massive pedigree behind it. It's been a scourge in every format it's been legal in. It is now banned in Historic because why would you let us play Blood Moon in Historic? Just a gross, super gross Magic card. It really is. You get an 8th edition one for $6. That's worth considering. We'll move on to Windborn Charge here. This is not as good of a Magic card. Most cards aren't, but especially not Windborn Charge. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a sorcery. 2 target creatures you control each get +2/+2 gain flying until end of turn. So you're supposed to end the game in limited with this card. You're supposed to hit a 4/4 and a 3/3 and come in for, what is it, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11 damage just on the spot. But even then, it's not going to work that way. Like 6 times out of 10, like one of these where like 40% of the time it works every time. Just not good. It costs way too much mana. It's not even a combat trick. You know what I mean? So I have to give this like a 1.3. That's a bad card. That is a disturbingly bad Magic card. We'll move on to Sawtooth Loon. Have we done this one before? I think we have. So we'll move on to Lord of Atlantis. It's the Lord of Atlantis, 2 blue mana for a merfolk. All merfolk in play gain Island Walk and +1/+1 while this card is in play. So they did finally give it a merfolk, creature type. I'm sure that's very old, but back in my day, I had people that played fish with 4 copies of Lord of Atlantis, and we just had kind of a house rule that even though it says Summon Lord right there, not a single thing about being a merfolk that discounted as a merfolk. Because come on, look at him, he's a merfolk. Come on, man. Come on. So, and people would argue like, oh, he's not just a normal merfolk, so he's not an actual merfolk. But King Triton is a merfolk. It doesn't matter that he's the king of Atlantis. And right, he's still a mer person. So anyway, Lord of Atlantis, glad to see it's officially a merfolk. This is some of Melissa Benson's best art. Really incredible color palette on this thing, man. Really is. But this still sees play in, the formats it's legal in, all the way up to modern, in the fish decks, because it has to. It has to. I would venture to say that Island Walk is a better ability than a lot of other abilities. Because, first of all, blue is a very strong color that has a presence in every format. Every format you can play blue in, which is all of them, it's there, baby. There's a lot of, a preponderance of blue decks playing islands. So you're more likely, that your creatures with the land walk ability are going to get through just because blue's so powerful and a lot of people play it. So I think that's cool, but also blue has, not so great of an ability when it comes to, does that make sense in English? It can't remove creatures very well, is what I'm getting at. So Island Walk is even stronger because blue has a hard time actually getting the creatures off the table. Swamp Walk is good because a lot of people play black. It's a really strong color. In all the formats, black has a presence because it is so good. But they can just blow away creatures with Swamp Walk. So again, I think Island Walk is even better than Swamp Walk for that reason. But I'm really getting into the weeds here talking about this one ability on the card that we never see printed anymore because it's kind of busted and a little situational. It makes cards really playable sometimes, not playable others. They try to get away from that. But Lord of Atlantis itself, again, still sees play to this day and is a must-have for sure in every fish deck. So I'm going to give this card a 6.7. And I think a lot of that is nostalgia brain stuff happening to me right now. But again, still sees play. Still sees play. So we'll move on to practical research. 5 mana, only ever printed in Strixhaven. 3 a blue and a red for an instant. Draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or sorcery. So 5 mana to draw 4. You may have to discard 1. Or you may have to discard 2, but that's fine because they're reanimator targets. They have flashback, like whatever's going on. They have retrace. They could have any manner of different abilities. But that said, the card's probably still not great. 5 mana is a little bit too much, but instant speed draw 4 is fairly attractive. So I'm going to give this, 4.7. Something like that. I think it's pretty close, but not quite. We'll move on to Ratcatcher, only ever really printed in Dissension, but also Masters 25. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 4/4 Ogre Rogue with Fear. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a rat card, reveal it, put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle up. So, obvious card for the 99 of rat decks, but even if you're not playing rats and you just have like a couple of really good rats in your deck, you might still play this guy. You really might. Fear, by the way, in case you've never seen that, means that it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and black creatures. So it's kind of difficult to block the guy, but not entirely hard. This is $8 from Dissension and almost $12 from Masters 25. So obviously it's getting some love. If it were printed more often, I think it would be a little less expensive. But that said, tutors in Commander are pretty decent, and tutors that happen more than once and occur on bodies are obviously great. Sucks that you can't like blink this guy and you have to wait a whole turn for him to actually do the tutor. So that kind of sucks, but altogether, pretty exciting Magic card. Still good in Commander. No matter what anybody says, still pretty good in Commander. So I'm going to give this, I'm finally getting down to the score, a 5.6. Pretty situational, but boy, man, when she pops, she popped crazy. But last card of the day today is Extra Planar Lens, originally printed in Mirrodin. It still costs $6 to buy any version of this card. 3 mana for an artifact with imprint. So that means when it comes into play, you can remove target land you control from the game. The removed card is imprinted on this artifact. Whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. So this can hit a basic land. I had to go back and like scan through it again. Like, can this hit basics? Yes, it can. So this is just 3 mana, especially in monocolored decks, to give yourself a one-sided mana flare. And one-sided mana flare is ridiculous. It's absolutely stupid. This does mean though that if you want to play mono green and double your mana production from your lands in mono green, which sounds powerful, right? You kind of can't really play that many basic lands or non-basic lands, if any, because you really want to hit forest off of this. It's the only one you can play more than one copy of, right? So you want to hit forest. So that means you have to keep down the number of copies of like Gaia's Cradle that you play in your deck, although you could probably still sneak a Cradle in. But any non-basic, you have to kind of forfeit the ability to play. So there is a downside to this card. But that said, I imagine, especially in mono green, if you drop this, even mono black, colors like that, you drop this on 3 and it stays out, then your turn 4 is going to be wild. Your turn 5 is going to be wild. Like, this is very, very good once it's actually stuck to the table. And it basically costs the same thing as a mana flare, and any deck can play it. I played during Mirrodin, but I was kind of caught up in playing, like affinity decks and stuff like that. And this was not a standard playable card. So with that in mind, I'm not very familiar with it like at all. But boy, are you good. I've heard of it, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you the text box if you'd asked me before having read it just now. This card is phenomenal, is it not? So I'm going to give this card an 8. I don't know if I'm like way off on this one. Chat, non-existent chat right now. But let me know in the comments. I haven't done an Ask the Audience yet today, so I guess I'll use the Ask the Audience on this one. What do you rate Extra Planar Lens? Is this a trap and I'm falling into it right now, or is it as good as I think it is? Yeah, it has a real opportunity cost sort of deck building downside, but I still think it's pretty busted, dude. So yeah, I'm sticking with an 8, maybe 7.9, but I don't want to cop out here. I'm sticking with an 8. What do you give it? Just let me know in the comments section, and I will see you tomorrow for Wednesday? Yeah, hump day. We'll be there. I love you guys. Bye. I'm still recording. Bye.